Hello, hello, everybody here. All good? Welcome.
Hello. The person called Niels, who was in charge.
When you do like
they don't understand it. Just now, I jumped out of the car. I volunteered. Well, they wanted to.
Sis.
So I'm going to go there. She can really fucking do
Hey, hold the line.
Stella, Jennifer, Tim.
I feel like I need a booster seat.
Okay, so flip from unmute to mute.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, sorry, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to slide this.
Stella, one minute, thank you.
Perfect. And
flip from unmute. Oh, I think you're already unmuted. Oh, sorry. That's good. Just flip from unmute. You're on mute. That's working. Okay.
Hello. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much for coming at such short notice. The FPA is delighted to be here on this really important day in the Julian Assange extradition journey. And we're here with Stella Assange, Jennifer Robinson, and Tim Dawson of the AUJ. So, as usual, we're going to start with a few opening remarks by all of the speakers, and then we'll start with questions from the floor. So it's over to you, Stella.
Hi, everyone, and sorry, can't see me.
You're fine.
You're fine, you're speaking to the cameraman.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you for coming on short notice. I'm sure you all understand the extremely serious implications this has for all of you and the profession and for human rights and for Julian personally. I spoke to Julian about 45 minutes ago. He had just learned of the decision. He was not contactable in Belmarsh, so no one had been able to deliver the decision to him until he... And we're not at the end of the road here. We're going to fight this. We're going to use every appeal avenue, and we're going to fight. I'm going to spend every waking hour fighting for Julian until he's free, until justice is served.
Jen, do you want to open your this?
Hello everyone, can you hear me okay? My name's Jennifer Robinson. I'm legal counsel for Julian Assange and for WikiLeaks and have been representing Julian for over a decade. This is the outcome that we have been concerned about for the last decade. This decision is a grave threat to freedom of speech, not just for Julian, but for every journalist and editor and media worker in this country. He faces 175 years in prison for publishing information for which he's won journalism awards the world over and has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. This should shock and concern everyone, every citizen, every journalist, every editor, every media organisation. We will continue to appeal. This is not the end of the road, and we will use every appeal mechanism available to us to prevent this extradition. We continue to call upon the Biden administration to drop this case because of the grave threat it poses to free speech everywhere and across the United States. And we continue to call on the Australian government to take action and to protect this Australian citizen who is at risk. Happy to hand over to you.
Hello, my name is Tim Dawson. I represent the National Union of Journalists and the International Federation of Journalists. The reason I'm here is because of the dire threats that this poses to all journalists. And it's worth thinking through what that threat is from the position of an individual journalist. If somebody hands you a classified document, or if you're contacted by a source who says, I'm a witness to significant criminality within an environment like the American media, then a journalist has to make a decision. They have to say, am I going to pursue this? Am I going to have a look at that document? Am I going to follow things up with that whistleblower? If Julian Assange is tried in the United States, if he's prosecuted in the United States, and clearly this extradition is a significant step along that route, then any journalist in receipt of information of that kind will face the same risk. And the calculation they'll make is it worth it? Is this document showing that the military has done something that is clearly illegal and immoral? Is it worth exposing that if I'm going to place myself at risk of the rest of my life in an American prison? If a whistleblower contacts you on a chat app and says, I've seen things, is it worth taking that risk if I might go to prison for the rest of my life? I fear that the answer in many, many cases is that people won't take that risk. We'd all hoped that the Home Secretary would exercise both humanity and a respect for free speech and for the democracy that supports, and she's chosen not to, which is a matter of great regret. We can only hope that the remaining legal route will provide some means by which this extradition and prosecution can be prevented.
Stella and Jennifer.
What is the first step from here?
Sure. From a legal point of view, we will be appealing this decision. We also have our cross appeal, so basically we have the ability to enliven our cross appeal points. Julian won the extradition case last year, and the US appealed, offered an assurance, shifted the goalposts, and won that on appeal. We still have our outstanding cross appeal points, which includes, for example, the free speech arguments, the fact that his inability to get a fair trial in the United States, the political nature of the case and the offence for which he's been sought, the abuse of process in this case, including spying on Julian and us as his legal team, and a range of other points that will be raised. We have 14 days to file our grounds of appeal, with some potential longer an extension of time after that point. But we will appeal this all the way through the British courts and, if necessary, to the European Court of Human Rights.
Just to add to what Jen was saying, the extradition order rests on a decision to reverse the initial outcome, a decision by the High Court to accept assurances that are severely flawed, that the Amnesty International called that decision a travesty. That is what this extradition order is resting on. We're going to raise points that have come up since the original extradition hearing back in 2020. And crucially, one of the most important developments is the revelation that the CIA plotted to assassinate Julian while he was in the Ecuadorian embassy and kidnap him and rendition him and was exploring poisoning him. This is known to the Home Secretary, but she signed it off anyway, but we will be raising it on appeal.
Stella, before we open to questions to the floor, can you give us an idea of how you feel today and what implications are there for your family for the decision?
Well, it's very difficult to describe what it's like as a family. Our resolve is redoubled for every decision that is taken, which is a travesty. I mean, I have no words to express what it's like to see the UK process being used as a way to prolong Julian's suffering again and again, and they've been there has been every opportunity to end Julian's suffering, to let him be free, because he has to be free. He should be free. Everyone knows it. Process is being used to hide atrocity, and we know that's from history, that can be done. And the UK should not be doing that. It should not be engaging in persecution on behalf of a foreign power that is out for revenge. That foreign power that committed crimes which Julian put into the sunlight. Specific, concrete crimes that have not been prosecuted, that have been just shoved under the rug. And Julian, who has done nothing wrong, he has done everything that any self-respecting journalist should do when given evidence of a state committing crimes, of corruption. They publish it because their duty is to the public. And Julian's duty to the public has landed him in prison for already more than 3 years, and he faces 175 years.
Who wants to ask questions? Just put your hand up, and when I call you out, just remind us who you are and who you work with. Let's start with the gentleman there. Yeah?
Mohammed Al-Mazi, I'm a contributor to the Centre in Jacobin and other outlets. So you've mentioned the fact that you'll be going ahead with the cross appeal. Will you also be filing an appeal in relation to the High Court's decision to accept qualified US government assurances? Will you be appealing that to the European Court of Human Rights?
We will be appealing. The court will likely be considering grounds of appeal in respect of both the decision today and in respect of the district judge's decision. We have exhausted domestic remedies with respect to the question of the assurances, and that will of course be part of our considerations when we do make an application to the European Court.
You still haven't exhausted domestic remedies in relation to the assurances? There's still more domestic opportunities?
The Supreme Court refused to hear the case.
Yeah. So I thought you had exhausted. Okay, thank you.
Lucy Marks from Reuters. You mentioned you wanted the Australian government to intervene. How do you expect to see that happen, and do you think there may be a different response to the change in government?
Well, the Australian government, the new government, has the only thing on display is illegality. Illegality by the powerful players that are trying to keep Julian silenced forever. He's an Australian citizen, he has rights, and of course the Australian government has to stand up for its citizens.
I wanted to ask a question and bring in Tim just a second. Tim, you talked about the implications for freedom of the press with this last decision by the Home Secretary. There are many people who don't think of Julian as a journalist. What does the NUJ think about this?
I don't think it really matters whether he's a journalist or not. What's beyond question is that the work that he was undertaking was journalism, one, and two, the alleged offences for which he is sought are the daily business of almost any investigative journalism. So I don't think it really matters whether you consider him to be a journalist or not. And to be honest, it's like angels dancing on the head of a pin. It's a distraction from the importance of what he was doing and of those crimes that clearly are crimes of journalism and that could be applied to scores of journalists all over the world.
But this is a country that prides itself on press freedom, and it's doing this to Julian Assange. What do you think could be done to help with the process?
Legally in this country, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm content that very able and capable lawyers are in charge of this case. I would just say one other thing about the implications of this. The world is a very turbulent place at the moment, and there are plenty of countries where media freedom is seriously under threat. Turkey, where there are scores of journalists in prison. China and Russia, where media freedom scarcely exists. When the UK government points out to those regimes the shortcomings of the way in which they treat the media, they have one answer: Julian Assange. If you're doing that to Julian Assange, why shouldn't President Erdogan lock journalists up? Why shouldn't Putin have his entire media in a complete straitjacket? That's, the damage that we do to our own reputation. It might sound highfalutin, but it actually has a real impact on the effect that we can have on countries of that kind.
And Jennifer, and then I'll come straight to you. Jennifer, Niels Meltzer, the UN former rapporteur on torture, wrote a whole book on the Assange case. And picking up from what Stella just said, there was a lot of illegality catalogued in the book. How did we get to this spot now? And apart from the appeals that you just mentioned, how much longer? How many avenues do you see to right this wrong?
Well, it's correct to say there's been, as we argued in the case below, there's been a huge amount of abusive process in Julian's case. There's been the seizure of legally privileged material from inside the embassy. There's been unlawful spying on him, on us as his legal team, on his family. There have been unlawful plots to assassinate and kidnap him. It is hard to imagine a case having more abusive process and injustices than this one. Of course, we are using every avenue available to us within the British legal system and ultimately in the European Court of Human Rights to put together the ongoing injustices against him and use all legal avenues available to us. And we hope that we will be successful, because if we're not, what that says about press freedom and about due process in this country and in democratic countries is incredibly concerning.
I just, to add that I think what's needed is to stop treating Julian's case as if it's some kind of sui generis case. This is now going to the High Court. This is setting legal precedent about the scope of press freedom in this country, not just in relation to extraditions and political extraditions, which the Home Secretary seems to find perfectly fine, which, by the way, the very extradition request that the US has sent for Julian under the Espionage Act for crimes charged under the Espionage Act are in open breach of the US-UK extradition treaty. Article 4, prohibiting political offences, extraditions for political offences. Both the US and the UK are in breach of their own bilateral extradition treaty. So what is decided at the High Court about the equivalence between the Espionage Act and the Official Secrets Act as it operates right now, that affects all of you and your colleagues. So stop treating this like it's Julian Assange. He's one of you. Whether you like it or not, he is one of you because he is being prosecuted as one of you.
Carl Dillon from ITV News. Jennifer, the Home Office said that today's decision by the Home Secretary was one that she made. She had very little discretion not to make once the court had said that the extradition could go ahead. Could you just tell us what your particular objections to her decision today are, and how you're going to argue against them?
That will be a matter for the grounds of appeal, which I'm not going to discuss right now. We'll make those available once they've been filed. But yeah, so discretion at this level, at this stage of the process, is limited to particular grounds. I'm not going to get into the grounds of appeal until they're filed, but we will continue to appeal against that decision, and we'll make it public and available to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, I saw one person behind you first. Yeah, with the beard.
Yes, thank you. Joe Laurie from Custodian News. I know it's a completely separate case, but do you have to take any encouragement from the fact that the Home Secretary was stopped in her tracks and was Rwandan flagged by the European Court?
About the Rwandan. The Rwandan flight was stopped.
I'm concerned about the knee-jerk reaction, the backlash against the decision, and how that might affect Julian.
I'm saying if the European Court was able to stop the Home Secretary from reporting these Rwandans, does that give you any encouragement that if this case, if Julian's case goes to the European Court, that they might be able to stop her then as well?
That the government is considering withdrawing from the European Court of Human Rights system.
Can you comment on that, please?
It would be an incredibly concerning development if the UK withdrew from the European Court of Human Rights. And we, of course, hope that if we have to get that far to the European Court, that they will take the right decision, which is to prevent his extradition. And if the UK removes itself from the court, that will be this country.
Enrique, and then.
Enrique Rubio, the Spanish news agency FM. Stella, you said you spoke to him a while ago. How did you find him? And was he actually expecting this news, or was he rather positive before? How did you find him?
Well, it's extremely difficult for Julian, where his life is being decided by third parties who are making life or death decisions based on politics, basically. You know, he's very strong, and I wouldn't say it's the opposite of being used to, but you have to basically fight back. He has his instinct is to fight back, and so is mine, and we're going to fight back harder, and you know, our resolve is twice as big now. That's how you prepare for uncertainty.
I've had him first, yeah, and then you.
Thank you. Ryan from the Press Association. I wonder what you've spoken to your boys about, whether you've had a chance to speak to them today, to effectively their father isn't going to be coming home anytime soon. I wonder what you've spoken to them, how you speak to very young children about your husband's situation.
I don't see what the point is to tell them that. I approach the situation as if Julian's on death row, and I will spare them that knowledge. When we go and see him, we make the most of it. We have an enjoyable time. I want their memories of their father, of which they might just have some months left, to be positive and happy. What's the point?
Giovanni Speleta de Televisión Española. Do you really hope the Biden administration will drop the case at any point? Did you get in touch with them at all? And do you have any expectations about that?
Well, the Biden was part of Obama's administration. Obama's administration decided not to prosecute Julian over the Chelsea Manning publications, which is what he's being prosecuted over after Trump decided to do it. Obama also commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence. I mean, look at the absurdity where you have the source with a commuted sentence and the publisher facing 175 years, already having spent 3 in prison. It is not in the Biden administration's interest for this to come to trial in the United States. And that is exactly what's going to happen unless they drop the case. We know that throughout the different administrations within the DOJ, within the administration, there has been a lot of disagreement about prosecuting a publisher under the Espionage Act, about prosecuting Julian. Even under the Trump administration, 2 of the DOJ prosecutors were moved off the case because they disagreed with the Espionage Act charges. Now, this is not some monolithic government will by the US government. There's a lot of different factions. There are people who understand within the administration the grave implications this has for the press. Going forward, will set, it's already being set, a precedent where future administrations, of whatever color they are, can do the same because it's been done to Assange. So it's not in anyone's interests that these protections, that these safeguards are watered down or reduced or crippled. And I'm sure Biden has some advice that that is the case. Of course he knows. He knows because He was part of the Obama administration.
I appreciate it's early days. Could you give any indication of when you might expect Julian's appeal to be done in the
The process now, as the Home Secretary made clear, we have 14 days to appeal, which could be extended a further 14. The US has 10 days to respond to that. The matter will then go for, it's an application for permission to appeal. It will go before a judge. It's the same process that we saw the US have to follow last year. So that's the kind of time frame we could be talking about, but it could be much sooner than that.
Hi, Devin Norton, RTL. Given everything you've just said about the Biden administration, do you think there's more pressure coming from the American side or the British side, as you said, that you believe it's a political decision? Why do you think it took Priti Patel so long to make a decision just before the time ran out? And on the back of that, everything you also said, where do you find the strength of those Julian, given the health problems that he's had?
Sorry, there's 3 questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they have to really tie themselves in knots in order to allow this outrageous extradition. I think it's probably been extremely difficult for them to come up with some kind of semi-coherent argument. Well, the pressure has to come from all sides, because what you have is the Trump administration set into motion the extradition and the indictment. And it set that into motion precisely because of the agenda it had as antagonistic towards the press, precisely because of the instrumentalizing Julian's case. Pressure has to come from all sides, because once you set a process in motion, it's what I was saying earlier, that you have the kind of the veil of process and bureaucracy to execute a persecution. There has been enormous pressure, in fact. The human rights head of the OSCE wrote to Priti Patel. The Human Rights Commissioner for the Council of Europe wrote to Priti Patel. About 2,000 journalists wrote to Priti Patel and Boris Johnson saying, do not extradite, this has implications for us in this country and around the world. 2,000. And countless other NGOs, Amnesty and the NUJ and RSF and so on. The Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, in the US has come out strong, saying this is one of the 3 issues that the Biden administration has to resolve in relation to the First Amendment. So they've prioritized that, and that just has to grow. The pressure has to grow, because what you have here is a process set in motion. It has to be stopped. Where do I find the strength? Well, I mean, I'm fighting for my husband's life. You know, I'll do whatever it takes to get him free. And I have a lot of support from millions of people that see this as wrong. And we've been wronged as a family. They went after our infant child when we were in the embassy. They were instructions to take his DNA. The other day, this is an anecdote, but the other day, my eldest son, who's 5, asked me who Mike Pompeo was, because he had overheard me say something about Mike Pompeo being a bad person in some conversation. And he said, well, who is Mike Pompeo and where is he? And I was trying to think, well, how do I explain? Because, sorry, the background of this is that Mike Pompeo was the one who reportedly ordered plans and sketches to assassinate Julian. while he was the director of the CIA. And I was thinking, well, how do I say, don't worry about Mike Pompeo? Because the reality is that Mike Pompeo didn't just plot to assassinate his father, Gabriel's father. He even targeted him for his DNA, like the inhumanity that has been meted out against Julian and those around him, and just breaking the law, left, right, and center. Like, this is profoundly wrong by any standard.
How does this help the last part of the question?
It's deteriorating by the day. You know, some days are harder than others. He's fighting, but there are all sorts of circumstances that are beyond his control in the prison. He should not be in Belmarsh prison. Belmarsh prison is a horrible place. And, you know, he has no control over his environment. And if you have some kind of serious health crisis, like Julian had a mini stroke in October, if you have a serious health crisis in a prison cell on your own, you know, you have a high chance of not surviving that. Like, if you can reach the alarm, if they answer the alarm, if there's a nurse on duty, and so on. Many prisoners die in that way.
Any other question? Carlos?
Yeah, Carlos, President of the Spanish newspaper El Mundo. Do you have an estimate of how long the appeal process could take from this moment? And are you also worried about this kind of fatigue that some media, or part of the media, are showing in the Assange case?
Do you want to take the timeline?
Yeah. In terms of the timeline for the appeal, as I mentioned earlier, we've got 2 weeks to appeal. That could be extended longer. The US will have an opportunity to reply, and then it will have to go before a judge to decide whether the appeal will go ahead. It could take anywhere between 6 months to a year, but it could be before that. We just don't know. Did you want to address the point of media fatigue,
Tim? Media fatigue is quite a hard issue to cover. I mean, it's obviously fantastic to see so many people here. And I think the extradition hearings had reasonable coverage, but there's no question, you know, the moment when Julian Assange was making the biggest headlines is a decade ago, and a story that goes on and on and on is quite hard to sustain. It doesn't, you know, the difficulty in sustaining it in no respect diminishes the import of it, but it's understandable that people you know, begin to think, well, what is new? And it seems like the same thing happening, you know, at each staging point. I think we need to find ways to keep it in the public eye. I think that unless we do, a monstrous injustice risks taking place that will have dramatic implications for the rest of us for decades to come.
Jennifer, Mohammed Mazi again, as a follow-up. You recently had a victory at the European Court of Human Rights. Could you explain, just very briefly, the significance of that victory in relation to Julian's case and whether or not the finding of the court there might be raised in any of the appeals? And could you raise your mic slightly higher, because it's kind of difficult to hear you?
Sure. Sorry. Hopefully is that better?
It's better, yeah.
Great. Yes, I took a case against the United Kingdom government on the basis of bulk surveillance and the information sharing arrangements with the United States that were revealed by Edward Snowden. My case was allowed to progress by the tribunal here in the UK on the basis that I had a reasonable belief I was spied on because of my position as a lawyer for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. That case ended up in the European Court, and the UK has admitted that my rights to privacy, my rights under Article 8 in relation to privacy and protection, and also Article 10 in relation to confidential journalistic material were violated by that scheme. This, of course, is part of a much broader pattern of unlawful conduct towards Julian Assange, his lawyers and his family. We've seen unlawful spying inside the embassy. We've seen attempts to unlawfully take the DNA of his toddler. We've got the ongoing case in Spain about the spying on Julian. We've had the seizure of legally privileged information. As I said earlier, it is difficult to understate the significance of the amount of unlawful conduct towards Julian and how that forms part of this case. So we will continue to be raising, as part of the cross appeal, the unlawful conduct that we know about, the unlawful conduct that we have since learned about by the CIA, and that will continue to be part of our case, both here and in respect of the European Court of Human Rights.
I wanted to ask you a bit of a delicate question, Stella. There has been talk about Julian Assange contemplating suicide if he were to be extradited. How does he keep sane, and how does he keep wanting to fight?
Well, Julian wants to live. But he wants to live with the possibility of freedom, with the possibility of being with his children and with me. So he has reasons to fight while he's here. But the fact is that if he's extradited to the United States, the conditions he will be under will be so oppressive. The case he is facing is so oppressive. He has no public interest defense. He cannot mount a defense on the basis of the significance of the documents that he published. That it will drive him to take his own life. And it's not an issue about simply a regular discussion about mental health. We're talking about driving a person to take their own life. That's where we're at. And he sees us on a weekly basis. He sees his children. We speak over the phone. We maintain, we're in each other's lives as much as we can be. And that keeps him going, that's in spite of all of this, we're a strong family unit. And, we got married on the 23rd of March, and it was lovely.
Ali Bakaju, African News Agency. Tim, I was wondering actually, the NUJ's lawyers, have they been involved in the case?
No, they haven't. Julian's a member of the Australian Journalists Union, but so he has never asked the NUJ for help, and fundamentally we provide legal support for NUJ members. So his legal support is from within WikiLeaks and elsewhere, not from the National Union of Journalists.
We have time for one last question. Who is this?
Is there any slightly hope that Julian Assange will get the bail to fight the last legal fight? And what do you think, how do you qualify describe that it has to be bail?
Well, we've applied for bail and been rejected 3 times, I think. The longer Julian remains imprisoned, which is over 3 years now, the more insane it is, and it becomes clearer for any objective observer that this is absolute insanity, especially because the very reason Julian sought asylum was because he feared prosecution by the US government and facing a lifetime in prison. And he is being punished for that because he got it right, because he was right. The US government was going to come down with all its might. Obviously, the extreme injustice that is clear for everyone to see is a problem for the UK courts, because it's monstrously, it's completely arbitrary, and they could end it. So, who knows? Maybe he can be, maybe there's a chance, but I don't want to anticipate, any timings or anything. But obviously, we want Julian to have bail, especially because it's very difficult for him to fight a case, to be able to speak to his lawyers, to receive the drafts of legal arguments, to be able to feed back to his lawyers under the conditions that he's in.
When are you next seeing him?
On Tuesday.
Thank you all. We can bring this to a close. And for all the interviews, please remember Joseph at the back has the list for Stella, and Tarina also at the back has the list for Jennifer. And thank you very much, Tim, Jennifer, and Stella, for being with us today.
This is the second one.
Would you forgive me if I have to run? No, thank you. I wish I did. I was looking for it before. Yes, I did. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Stella.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
So that I know who's... Okay.
It's okay to put this out this wide enough pathway there.
Great.